updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So, Field Marshal Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, yeah, seriously, feeling a little pressure given the massive fraud committed against Minnesota and American taxpayers by essentially, how else to describe it, rings of Somali fraudsters. At least some may be American citizens, but of Somali extraction. So he addressed, and not to mention, he's also feeling heat from within his own state government. Again, that open letter that a couple of hundred state employees in the Human Services Department, the state of Minnesota, wrote, basically saying the reason that we couldn't interdict this fraud is because Tim Walz was willfully blind to it. He punished and sidelined whistleblowers and just would refuse to engage on the topic. So it wasn't like it was going unnoticed by everyone in Minnesota state government. You wouldn't think so, fraud at that level where you're extracting a billion or billions, plural, of dollars. We heard from a TSA whistleblower that Liz Collin, the documentarian and former news anchor up there interviewed, of people, it was for 5 years she was there and she would watch always the same MO. 2 Somali men, bags of cash, millions of dollars allowed to go through. In one instance, a bag of passports, ostensibly counterfeit passports, allowed to go through. What's going on there? Well, Tim Walz is on the job, and of course, when I say on the job, he is going to play the race hustle to deflect attention away from his incompetence, maliciousness, combination of the two. Difficult to say.
Look, it's not law-abiding citizens. If that were the case, there's a lot of white men should be holding a lot of white men accountable for the crimes that they have committed. I think for the community to maybe educate their population, because I think what you're seeing here is there's secondary victims in this, that there's providers inside the community that are then victimizing the community themselves by signing them up, because when we're going to some of these people, they're like, I had no idea I was in this program. So I think it's asking us then, for every crime, which of course the majority being committed by white men, asking us to do more about that. I think it's crime in general. And I think the biggest thing on this is just making sure that we're educating the population. And again, this is 80 people or so that have been convicted in this, maybe some more in that, out of a broader ring. Medicaid fraud will stretch across all racial demographics, all ethnic groups. So I think it's really important for us to note each community's got this in their own midst, but to blame them and say that they should have been responsible for stopping it, I think that's a pretty hard reach. I think we continue to educate folks about why they shouldn't commit crimes. You would hope that it's being taught both at home and at schools and in our society. But no, I think this idea that the Somali community's to blame for this because they didn't do more, I think that's how we got into this. And that's, again, I know we're not going to lose the whole plot here. All this work that's being done, Donald Trump brought this to the attention like this is something brand new. This is not brand new, and it's been being worked on. But he made it white hot and very dangerous.
Bringing attention to this is dangerous, not the underlying criminal acts, right? By the way, we're not blaming the 100,000 Somalians, people of Somali extraction in this country. The Somali diaspora. We're blaming you. You're the governor. Don't go dare blaming the community writ large. We're not blaming the community writ large. We're blaming you and your buddy Biden and the fraudsters and those who run interference for the fraudsters and maybe receive campaign donations from the fraudsters, Keith Ellison, Ilhan Omar. Don't go blaming the community. Yeah, real skillful deflection there, Tim. Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief for Policy, responding to Walls.
Well, he's right about one thing. It's not brand new. The Somali community has been engaged in massive, endemic, systematic fraud against the American taxpayer for years. We're going to discover ultimately, and we are in the throes right now of a full-throated, all-hands-on-deck federal investigation, is that the scope, scale, size, and sheer magnitude of the fraud eclipses anybody's worst nightmare. Look, according to official government records, 90% of Somali households with children are on federal welfare. The real number is probably 100% because federal records always undercount. So you're talking about a population that has been imported into Minnesota in which virtually every single member of that population is receiving welfare from the federal government. This could very well end up, Laura, being the greatest financial fraud scandal in American history.
For more on this, please be joined by Ronald Vitiello, Senior Advisor for DHS and CBP, Office of the Commissioner, former Chief of U.S. Border Patrol and Deputy Commissioner and retired Acting Director at ICE. Ron, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Thanks for inviting me.
It's sort of two communities sort of mass migration that were, granted sweeping legal access to America and concentrated themselves in communities like Minneapolis. The Somalis that we're talking about in these fraud rings, potentially with some of the money getting overseas to terrorist organizations located in Somalia, including Al-Shabaab. And then the Afghan community, of which we've heard recently from DNI Gabbard, 18,000 people in this country with ties to terrorism. And of that, there's a 2,000 person subset, according to their estimates, of Afghan asylees, again, mass parole granted by Biden, 2,000 Afghan asylees with ties to terrorism. So this is, it's one of those things we're trying to emphasize here. This has to be done on an individualized basis, because when you do it in mass like it has been done, and you talk about vetting that clearly it either didn't happen or is ineffectual, you are opening the doors to all kinds of illicit activity and illicit actors preying on American people and perhaps other immigrants as well.
100%. This is the threat and the real risk that we all face from an immigration system that lacks integrity under Democratic leadership, including Joe Biden and the last administration, and an open border, effectively encouraging anybody with enough energy to make it to the southwest border. They just walk in. The government itself said that they weren't going to look for people who were in the country illegally, even though they broke the law. And we went from 4 years of millions of people being encountered by the men and women of the front line, and then probably millions more who came in and no one saw, no one was apprehended. And as an example, concentrated efforts in the Minneapolis area for the 2 days last week, 2.5 days worth of operations. They arrested 80 people from Somalia who are out of status in that community. And so these risks are real. They're not just related to what happens in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but we all saw the threat brought to us from Venezuela with this vicious gang, Tren de Aragua, which we continue to arrest at record numbers in the interior. They were only here during the pendency of the Biden administration, and they wreaked havoc in major cities all over the country.
Another cohort, and I'm not saying this is exclusively Indian nationals, but we're seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence about this being a particular area of interest for Indian nationals. These fraudulent CDL licenses. We just had reporting from Bill Malugin over at Fox. 25-year-old Indian national arrested by Border Patrol in Lukeville, Arizona, after crossing illegally on December 24th of 2023 was released into the United States by the Biden administration. He's now facing charges for vehicular homicide after he crashed into the back of a vehicle on an expressway in Washington State, crushing it between another truck and killing a 29-year-old man. ICE has placed a detainer with him with local law enforcement in Kings County, Washington. Of course, that won't be honored. Sanctuary city, county, state, just like Illinois, just like California, New York, and so on and so forth. And Duffy, Sean Duffy, the Transportation Secretary, just issued another letter. New York State, the 8th state to have been found to systematically be issuing fraudulent CDL licenses. And in New York State, to my point about it's not exclusively Indian nationals, but there's been a number of incidents. A Tennessee truck driver is dead after Chinese national, not proficient in English, and who has a non-domiciled New York commercial driver's license, crashed a tour bus. I mean, so it's another source of lawlessness and danger for the otherwise law-abiding in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. The risks in that area are also very real, real consequences to men and women who live in the United States and follow the rules and work hard and travel our highways. And you have these blue state politicians and these blue states with policies that endanger the rest of us by giving people who insufficiently speak English, were undervetted when they came across the border, and are on, and are given license to drive these big rigs all over the country. It's a real problem. We do have the silver lining here is that whole of government is dedicated to trying to solve this problem. CBP has done a great job with the leadership of President Trump at the White House, securing the border in ways that I've never seen, frankly, in 40 years. The border is safer now than it's ever been in my lifetime, for sure. And that's going to continue. That's going to increase. The capabilities at the border will be coming forward with the money that came in the reconciliation. More border wall, more frontline personnel, both at CBP and at ICE. So that will continue. Operations in the interior will continue, thereby preventing some of these crimes from occurring, finding those that are criminals who are also in the country illegally, and putting them on a path for removal.
That's where I was gonna go next. Actually, I mean, your grade for the Trump administration's work to secure the border, you just explained. How would you assess the job they've done? And it's a massive one, and it's a complicated one. We all stipulate the job they've done with respect to enforcement and removal operations. Is there anything that you've seen that you say, well, they could have used a lighter touch here, or they could have zigged here when they zagged? Anything that you see that troubles you?
Operationally, I do not. I do think that the challenges are in the courts with these judges who are more activists than they are judges, trying to prevent lawful law enforcement operations or trying to restrict them in a way that is hindering the great work that the front line is doing. More to come, more capability, again, coming forward. There's going to be 10,000 net new frontline personnel at ICE to do this work. They are scaling up detention resources so that they have places to put people on the path for removal and hold them in custody until those removals occur. We heard last week about, the aviation purchases that they're making, so they increase capabilities across the board, as we will at the border itself.
Are you encouraged by some movement? And now this is not just rhetorical, but Alexander Dobrindt, I'm talking about movement in Europe. He is Chancellor Merz's interior minister in Germany. And he has deployed 3,000 additional federal police officers to Germany's borders to reduce illegal crossings. He sent a letter to the head of federal police rescinding a verbal directive from September of 2015 in which Angela Merkel, who was, took the same open borders approach that all these heads of state in Europe, Western Europe have taken, prevented border officers from turning back any illegal migrants who simply uttered the word asylum, much like we had with the Biden administration. It seems that at least there's some movement in the direction of of state sovereignty and border control within some Western European countries. And it's sort of important not only for the sovereignty of their country, but also for the optics to say, look, this is a move that is happening in countries that want to really provide for the public safety of their citizens. It's not just America. So, take a look around, listen to what some politicians are just saying, because they're saying some of the same things you're hearing from the Merz regime in Germany, even if they're not doing it like in the UK. But actually even look at some of what's being done, like with this interior minister in Germany. It is not dissimilar to what you're seeing from the Trump administration.
100%. Yeah, he's provided a wonderful example for Western Europe and other countries around the world that because people understand, this is a common sense issue. If you have an out of control border, you have a chaotic immigration system that lets large numbers of people who are undervetted into the country, the consequences to the people who live there are going to be dire. We talked about, these truck drivers. We talk about these criminals, these gangsters, the fraudsters in places like Minneapolis. Western Europe is now learning this lesson. Maybe it's not too late, and they will benefit the quality of life in those countries by regulating immigration and allowing only those that are vetted and are a benefit to the society. Right? Immigration is supposed to, in America, is supposed to work for the people who live here. It's not supposed to benefit the rest of the world. It's supposed to benefit us here in the United States. And Western Europe now is coming to the understanding and has seen the real dangers of out-of-control migration. And so Germany, England, the UK writ large is taking steps with an example here in the United States.
He is Ronald Vitiello, Senior Advisor for DHS and CBP Office of the Commissioner, former Chief of U.S. Border Patrol and Deputy Commissioner, and retiring Acting Director of ICE. Retired Acting Director of ICE, I should say. Ron Vitiello, thanks so much for joining us, as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
And Ron joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank, a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Anthony and John here from Bionic Auto Parts, proud clients of Signature Bank. We deliver high-quality, recycled and remanufactured auto parts to Chicago and Milwaukee. Our mission is simple: provide parts safely, reliably, with great customer satisfaction.
We process over 350 vehicles a month. With big banks, everything took forever. Layers of approvals and endless delays. At Signature Bank, one call got it done. Whether it's lending,